picture yourself on two different timelines. There's the you that starts and eventually progresses, and the you that never starts.
I want to be that person. I want to continue to do the things that bring me joy no matter what people think.
A lot of these inner blocks, they may not even be your own voice. These are other people's voices that have been established in your mind, and they tell you, oh, you're not creative, you're not good at this, no one's gonna like that, your ideas are weird.
And that same feeling that I had when I decided to move to Australia on my own with a one-way ticket is the same feeling I felt when I decided to start my own business. Terrified. I think with any work of art, it does need to evoke emotion. I've cried singing that song, and it's because it's an emotionally evocative song. There's even viral
I've cried
videos
as well, actually.
You've
when
cried
you're singing
listening.
it.
You cried? We should do an ASMR podcast where all we do is
live.
sounds.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about creativity, and we're going to whisper the entire time. So strap on your seatbelt and get ready for an insane episode. No, just kidding. This episode will be about creativity, though, but none of that whispering nonsense. It's going to be about creativity, and the idea behind this episode is that we're gonna dive into why people feel compelled to create things, and that there's so many people out there, me included, that they might have dreams of creating certain projects, creating businesses, creating anything. And there's internal and external blocks that come in the way and stop us from creating the things that we want to. And yeah, it's pretty funny. And I'm here with my girlfriend, Nicole.
Hi.
Who's has a lot of expertise in the area, actually. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about your background in design and creativity?
Yeah, so I've been working in the creative industry for almost 10 years now, in creative agencies or in in-house environments in the marketing team. So marketing and creative tend to go hand in hand. So I've been working as a graphic designer for quite some time now, and I've just left the 9-to-5 and I've started my own design creative studio. And yeah, that is what I'm up to right now. I'm starting my own business.
Yeah. Why do you think you were drawn to design to begin with? Like, what is it about that field that you were drawn to? And at what part of your life did you start to be drawn? Was it always the case that you liked design?
No, I think for the longest time, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I went to Queen's University and I studied arts and sciences. I've always been interested in the arts, film and TV, acting, singing, dancing, actual art, fine art, but I never thought about design. My dad's an architect, so that was always kind of in the back of my mind. And then when I was at Queen's, I just was really unhappy. I didn't like the courses or the material. I found it wasn't stimulating me enough. And I also think partly I wasn't taking the right courses. And anyway, I went traveling for a really long time. And when I came back, I was looking at a bunch of different programs, and design seemed to be a really great way to be in a creative field, but still able to make money.
Right.
And still, being creative, but having that ability to get a job a little bit easier. Not that you can't get a job in fine arts. I think if you're talented, you can do it. But I've never really had a medium, an artistic medium.
So for you wanted something that would allow you to express your creativity, but also make a decent living. So that you were compelled to create, and then this type of pathway just felt like it suited you perfectly.
I think that, and also the lifestyle of designers. I remember Googling jobs that you can do from anywhere in the world.
Right.
And graphic design, writing, those kinds of jobs came up first. And so I thought, okay, graphic design, but I never really wanted to, which is funny because that's what I do now, but I never wanted to do logos. I remember saying that. I don't want to create logos. I don't want to do that. But I didn't realize that graphic design was an umbrella term for so many other things. And really, the world around us is full of graphic design. You just don't know it. When you go, in the street, all the signage, if you go to the airport, all the signage at the airport, the menu at a restaurant, the glasses in front of us, book design. There's just literally design all around us. And
these are actually things that I really didn't start to notice until I met you and you started talking about graphic design, because you do take for granted how commonplace it is to have some graphic designer create that thing.
Yeah.
You drive around, you see billboards all over the place, you see ads on TV, but you never really realize that, okay, someone is spending a significant amount of time curating that, crafting it, and then we a lot of time unconsciously pick these things up, and if they're effective, then it doesn't matter if it's unconscious, you still take away what was in that design. And then I only really noticed that once I saw you putting in a lot of time creating these billboards for real estate and things like that. But I do think it'll be interesting for people to hear that you weren't necessarily, like, from the day you were born drawn towards creativity, but you have gone through a journey and you now own your own design studio. So, like, you're, in terms of creative jobs, it's quite high up there. It doesn't really get much more creative than owning your own design studio. Do you think you've gotten more creative over time as a person, even like if you assess like who you are now compared to a few years back, or let's say 5-10 years back? Can you see if you've gotten more creative, and if you have, why do you think that is?
Well, I think I've always been drawn to creativity, even as a kid. Like, my mom would always find me behind her couch drawing on the couch or drawing on the walls. And she took away all my crayons and all of my pens. And so I started drawing with diaper cream and using the negative space in the diaper cream to make drawings.
Yeah.
And so I think I've always been kind of drawn to it. And I've always really loved the arts in school, especially writing. Creative writing was so much fun for me. I really enjoyed that. But I do think that it is a skill that can be sharpened over time, and being forced into, well, not forced, I've gone into it willingly, but forced in the job to think outside the box all the time and to be creative with every project that you're doing. It does feel kind of like your mind is a knife and you're constantly sharpening it and refining your craft over time. And every single day you're faced with needing to think differently and outside the box. But I do think that with lots of practice and with so many years, it does tend to evolve that skill. But I do think that as we get older, we might be more trapped in our minds and overthinking things a little bit more. Whereas when you're younger, your care for what other people think is not really there. So I do think that children might actually be more creative than adults, not because they have the capacity to be more creative, but because they have less blocks in their way.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And I mean, even just you, when you went traveling, there's something about the youthful naivete or ignorance where you just kind of, you don't know what you're getting into, but you're going to go for it anyway. And there's something beautiful about that, because someone who's, I don't know, maybe calculating things too much, too analytical, they've seen a lot of things, they're going to doubt, and they'll maybe end up not pursuing certain creative things, or in your case, like adventurous travel. For you, like, if you have evolved over time, are there certain things, that tools or kind of like tips and tricks that you've added to your routines or your repertoire when you're creating things that you think could potentially help other people?
I do think that everyone is different with what they need in order to be creative. But I think even it was Rick Rubin that said that you need to be in the state where you allow creative ideas to come. So it's not necessarily the creative idea itself, but it's the state. So for me, it's environment. I live in, as you know, I have a studio apartment, and it's full of bright light and it's quiet. And I think the only time that I can truly be creative is when I'm at home in complete silence, or have the ability to blast music, which is what I do, but having the ability to be in complete silence if I need to. and being in an inspirational environment. For instance, I really love my apartment and the layout. I love the decor. I love the plants. I love everything that's there. So I can light candles. I can, just create a really peaceful state of environment, which makes me really get into that zone. That's the first thing. So the environment. And the second thing is not being interrupted. That is something that is so important.
Right.
I do tend to get into the zone where I think this could be an ADHD thing too, where you're completely locked in and time and space is no longer a thing. You're just there. Sometimes I forget to eat. I forget to get up to go to the washroom. I forget to go for a walk, or not even just forget. I just don't, because I'm completely locked in. And it's really difficult to kind of get back into that zone if you get interrupted. So working a 9 to 5 is really difficult when you need to be available to communicate with people. But I remember having to set boundaries at work and tell them, when I'm in a creative flow, I really do need to be locked in order to get to this project on time. And so that is how it is for me. If I'm writing, for instance, I can't have any noise. I can't have any music, nothing. If I'm designing, I love to have music or podcast or something. The extra stimulation is actually completely fine. It really helps, especially the type of music, depending on the project. It really helps me get into it.
Right.
And yeah, it's really helpful.
And a lot of those are like external blocks, like in your environment, people bugging you, things like that. Are there certain like internal blocks that you've been able to address throughout your creative career? I know we said like as you get older, there can be a tendency that you might have more blocks, but if you're deliberately trying to examine your own blocks, the idea is that you can actually reduce them even as you get older. And that's kind of the whole purpose of this podcast, is that we'll be able to be more creative for having learned about creativity and how it works. So what about the inner blocks for you?
I think it's really tough because sometimes I'll wake up some days and I'll feel extremely inspired to create, and I have the ideas coming, or even a lot of the times the ideas come when you're not even trying. It's when I'm in the shower, when I'm completely not even thinking about a project, that I'll all of a sudden have an idea. Or if I'm out for a walk and I'll think of something while I'm on my walk, it's when you're not trying to force it. I find that it happens, which is difficult when you have deadlines.
Yeah.
And that is where it can be really tricky when it comes to making this a profession, is the pressure that you're under to create a masterpiece with an allotted time. And now that I'm running my own business, I still understand that deadlines are deadlines and you need to create no matter what. But I do find that the less resistance you have to needing to come up with a really good idea, the better. I think if I'm working on a project and I'm not able and I'm blocked, I will just switch to a different project, something that's a little bit easier, and then I will go back to it. But I think forcing it can sometimes make things worse.
Yeah, and like you mentioned Rick Rubin, which for anybody who doesn't know, check him out. One of the greatest producers alive. Got the book here, The Creative Act. Brilliant book. I mean, he's produced some of the greatest music that probably for all sorts of genres too, from like rap. He did Adele, Eminem, I think, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Johnny Cash. I don't know. The list is insane. Just check his Wikipedia or whatever.
Yeah.
But he said that his most important role when he's in the studio is just trying to get the musicians that he's working with to not be thinking about the outcome and just be purely in the moment, in like a playful moment where they're not thinking about, oh, how is someone else going to hear this? So the outcome is totally out of their mind. And so if that's what Rick Rubin's main thing that he says that he does for musicians, basically, how can we be a Rick Rubin to ourselves so that we are not thinking about the outcome? And how do you manage that type of thing when your job is to create designs, and so the outcome is important, but you know you're going to be the most creative, your best creative self when you're not thinking about the outcome? How do you kind of piece those things together? And it's obviously a bit of a dilemma, but how do you manage that?
It's a great question. I think the biggest thing is respecting your taste. And I think even Rick says this in one of his podcasts about how he knows that he has good taste in music. And so when he hears something, he knows it sounds good. And that's all the explanation that you need. With his job, it's a little bit different because it is artistic. It's not so much of a design where it needs to work for a specific purpose. Obviously, they need to sell albums, but it is art at the end of the day, and it is subjective. So I think that
it's kind of it's kind of the central dilemma, I guess, of a designer is you know what the client wants, and so you kind of have to aim towards some outcome, but you yourself are trying to be as creative as possible.
Yeah, you want to trust your taste. You want to trust your taste. You want to know. I know that a project is going to succeed when I really love it and when I'm really proud to showcase it.
Yeah.
If you're not proud to showcase your work, then that's probably the indicator that it isn't as good as it could be. So I do think that having that sense of pride in your work and knowing that it's really good and getting that emotional excitement from a project is really important.
Yeah.
But also I think with design, it's a little bit different because you do have targets that you're hitting. So you do have goals. And so in some ways you can quantify if a project does well. So after you, let's say, do a brand for somebody, if they've hit sales, let's say they hit 1 million in sales the year after they've rebranded, then you've done a really great job. And so you can quantify it that way. Probably the way that Rick does it is by, the amount of albums that sell. But I do think that there's something to, like you said, kind of detaching from what people think. And I think most things in life go really well when you're not thinking about the end result and you're not thinking about what people are going to think, and you're just doing the best work that you can possibly do, be in the zone as much as you can, put it out there and just release it out into the world.
Yeah. And I guess as best as you can, try to work on projects that you feel are aligned with your creative instinct. Because I've seen you work on some projects and you're getting you get excited about them.
Yeah.
Which I like. I wish I had that type of excitement when I'm working on the stuff I work on with Excel sheets and numbers and whatnot. But you'll be pumped up and fired up to be working on a certain email campaign, but then others might not excite you as much. And so I guess you have some control in that with picking certain clients, certain projects, and so that you're not working on things that it just doesn't inspire you creatively.
I think that's exactly it. When I was working the 9 to 5, I wasn't able to actually control the types of projects that I was getting. And there is something nice to be doing projects that are outside of your style and just doing work because, the money is coming through, it's fine. But it really does change the game when you're working on things that really light you up and, like you said, align with your values and align with your style. There's nothing more exciting than when a client says, this is what I want, but that's exactly the type of style that you like working in. Mm-hmm. It's just such an exciting moment.
What do you say to people that they don't consider themselves a creative person and they think that's for other people? Do you think everybody is creative, or are a select kind of percentage of people creative?
I think that everybody can be creative. I think that it's an innate human quality. It just might be something that people don't tap into as much. And I definitely think that every human being has the ability to be creative. I mean, if you look at the world around us, it's also, you say that you work with numbers and spreadsheets all day, but those people are needed in order to create things in the world. If you look at planes and this table, and we need engineers, we need those people to create new things.
And I think I can actually get pretty creative
with spreadsheets.
Some of my formulas and stuff are
top notch.
Not a wide appeal. That's the thing with creativity is you could be creative, but just other people don't have any interest in your creations. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no creativity to it. Like if I make a beautiful spreadsheet and it's got some insane formulas and it spits out like just something that I'm like, oh, this is beautiful, but other people see that they couldn't care less. But it doesn't mean that there was no creativity involved.
Exactly.
And I like the way that Rick Rubin describes it, one of the greatest creators of all time. And so his take on creativity is that it's essentially just your unique expression of yourself. So like you put your perspective into the project that you create, and sometimes it works out that everybody loves your perspective. You painted it in a certain way and everyone says, wow, like that's like Picasso level. But then sometimes nobody cares. And I mean, even for those great artists, and I think you're the one who told me that like a lot of the artists, Picasso and probably others, during their lifetime, nobody liked their art.
No.
They were basically broke. And then it's after they die that people come around to it and they say this was actually a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And I think maybe a lot of the great works tend to be like that, where if an artist is truly thinking really outside the box and they're on the limits of creativity, it might actually take a little bit of time for the audience and everybody else to kind of catch up in a way. So sometimes they were too advanced for their time. I think Sammy, my brother Sammy, was telling me about an artist, musician the other day that was kind of similar. Like a lot of his music only popped off after he had died, or like many years after he had created it.
Yeah.
And so it's not to deny something is not creative if it doesn't get attention.
Absolutely.
So yeah, everybody can be creative, and the things that we consider to be creative, yes, those might be the things that are widely considered to be valuable and original ideas. Like there are certain people, a very small percentage of people, who have created the majority of things. Like whoever created like Ferrari or this microphone, like that is a very small percentage of the total people. And most people are not ending up creating the things that we use and see. It's a very small percentage of people, but I think that's just because, yeah, I mean, not everyone's compelled to create the same things, and I do think that there are so many blocks for so many people as to why they don't create. And then again, some people are gifted. I don't want to deny that. I think some people like they might be
just pop out of the womb ready to do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, you do hear about like kids that like are just like genius on the piano at 3 years old, and it's like, okay, there's obviously talent as well that allows someone, it gives someone more tools to be able to create at a high level. Mm-hmm. Are they any more creative? If we're using Rick Rubin's definition, no, because they're just outputting their unique expression into the world just like anybody else can. And I think the more you practice it, the better that you'll be able to become. And yeah, like I think at a deep level, a lot of people are compelled to create. Like, do you find that like sometimes when you're creating, it's not that you just want to create, it's that you actually kind of need to, like you'll spiritually feel frustrated if you're not creating? Does that happen to you ever?
Absolutely. And I think in general, I don't feel it that often because I am needing to be creative on a daily basis. And now that I'm running my own business, it's not just Monday to Friday, it's Monday to Sunday.
Yeah.
So I do think that I'm able to scratch that itch a little bit more than most people. I think if I was in a job that wasn't creative, I would be desperately seeking creative outlets outside of it. I do think that it is difficult sometimes to work in a creative career because in my mind, I really do believe that creativity is a finite resource day to day. I think it's an infinite resource your whole life, but day to day, I do find if you're spending 8 hours on a client project, using all of your creative capacity, and then you need to sit down and work on your own business, or you want to sit down and write a book or write a song or make a piece of art, I do find that my creative threshold has been diminished. I feel like I'm at 3% battery at the end of the day.
Right.
So I do think that I am still navigating how to be creative outside of my job because it's so taxing on that side of my brain.
How do you restore, like, let's say you've had a long day of creating. Do you have any ways that you prefer to restore that creative energy?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a quote, I don't know who said it, but it says creative people need time to sit around and do nothing.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that. I think that when you're able to just turn off your brain for a little bit and not do anything, just go for a walk, watch a TV show, read a book, consume other people's art, and just find a way to do things where your brain is switched off. That's when I find that I replenish, is when I'm able to just stop creating and start consuming, or even just doing nothing at all.
Yeah.
I find is the way that I replenish the most. And if I don't do that, then I find that my creative ability just goes down a massive percentage.
Do you find going for a walk can be like a good reset? Because I find like doing something like taking a shower or going for a walk where you kind of have just a little bit of activity and it's enough to take your mind off things, but not so strenuous that you're like going to be mentally draining yourself. Those things I find very helpful to restore.
Definitely.
Whether it's like restoring my creativity, I don't have as much pressure to create, I guess, as you might, but I find for sure those things restorative, or literally just like staring out a window, looking at like the squirrels running in the tree. Like, just something
touching
where
some grass.
Yeah. Your mind is like not working so much. It's more like floating.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think even when you and I went to your cottage this last weekend, that was the restoration that I needed. Yeah. All we did was hang out with your parents. We were at the lake. We were with the dogs. We were looking at the trees. We were reading. We were talking about this podcast. We were just being.
Yeah.
And I think when you're doing less of the human doing and more of the human being, that's when you can kind of reset.
Right.
So I find that really restorative. Taking baths, as you know, I love taking baths. I find it extremely restorative even throughout the day.
Yeah.
So I do think that those kinds of things is really important. I really do think that creative people need to rest and they need to allow themselves to reset in that way in order to create more.
How do you differentiate between the times where your mind is telling you to procrastinate by taking a bath, by going for a walk, or by looking at the squirrels running around, versus when you really need it? Because I think that's at the core of the creative, is there's going to be so many rationalizations or justifications. We can call it resistance to you actually going and doing the thing that is creating. So there can be all these tools to restore and do that, but that's all well and good. But if you don't end up sitting down and doing the creation, then you're not really doing
you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
I think the difference would be the type of things that you're doing to procrastinate. So I think that I realize I'm procrastinating a creative project if I'm on my phone. So if I'm on social media, Instagram, TikTok, any of those, I know that it's a procrastination. I'm not resting my mind. If anything, I'm kind of bulldozing it with more information and more content. I find that to be the opposite of recharging. It's just kind of mindless consumption.
Right.
So that is a great example of procrastination. I also think day to day, I find that I'm the most able to create in the morning after I've had a really great night's sleep. So I know I'm procrastinating if I'm not creating in the morning.
Right.
But I do think that if you've been creating all day and then you're done in the evening, that's when you know that you need to restore.
Yeah.
And sometimes I might restore in the morning and then create at night, but it very rarely works out that way.
Do you find it similar, like what we were talking about the other day about with workouts, where sometimes there's just so much resistance to start, but then once you get 5-10 minutes into the workout, your body's warmed up a little bit. You're like, okay, I could do this. I'm good to go now. Do you find that ever happens when you sit down at your desk and you might just really not want to sit down. But then once you get there, you start typing, you start doing the thing, then it starts to, the weight of the resistance starts to lighten up a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. I think getting at it and conquering the resistance, as they say in the War of Art, I definitely think that that's a big hack to it. But there are days where you sit down, you force yourself, and nothing is coming out in terms of a creative idea. But I have found that you do just have to sit down and kind of grind through it until eventually you do come up with some great ideas, or visually things start to make sense.
Yeah, and it seems to be the case because a lot of great creators have a very similar advice. Like, there's a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. There's the War of Art, and in both they really recommend like doing the thing every single day. So in The Artist's Way, there's a recommendation to do morning writing, write 3 pages every single morning, no matter what. And at the beginning of the book, she says this one specifically is non-negotiable. You must do the writing every single day. And then my brother said a quote the other day that like one of his favorite artists said that he gets deeply inspired every single day at 7 a.m. So, which is basically another way of saying that like no matter what, he's going to be
right. He's not actually inspired. He's forcing himself to. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And that makes sense. I would really like to start doing The Artist's Way. I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I think that is a critical component that like it can't really be overstated. It's a lot easier said than done, but I think anytime anybody wants to create anything, they have a project that they've been dreaming about. If you just chip away at it day after day after day after day, that creation will really come a long way, and you might be totally surprised where it lands, and you're like, wow, I didn't know I was able to create like that. Because I think a lot of people are. It's just there's so many blocks in the way, and it does, to be fair, take a fair bit of discipline and persistence for some projects. You just really got to put the time in.
It really does, and also not just necessarily forcing yourself to do it day to day. I also think giving yourself a sense of urgency where you have no other choice but to do it. For example, I quit my 9-to-5 and I had no other option but to complete my own branding and my own brand identity and create something for my design studio called Studio Hot. Yeah. I had to do it. And for so many years working at agencies, I'd always thought about starting my own studio and what it would be called and how it would look and how it would feel. And there would be days that I would be really inspired to create it. And then as the day-to-day went on and I was working my 9-to-5, really tired from working on client projects every day, I just never actually started it until I quit my job. Mm-hmm. I didn't even have it done when I had decided to quit my job. I had to do it after. So I think that's also something that's helpful if you're listening and you really need to start this creative project. Like, let's say you want to write a book or you want to start your own business, not to necessarily give you advice to quit everything. It's just giving yourself that fire under your butt to do it will actually make you do it.
Yeah, you did what they call in war strategy, you're burning the boats.
Yeah, I burnt my boat. I went on an island and there was no going back.
Yeah, you arrive at enemy territory, you burn your own boats. Yeah. There's no way out but forward.
Exactly. And that's why it's called Studio Hot, because I burnt my boats.
Yeah, so Studio Hot, I feel like there's a lot of elements of you personally. Like, there's things that you're drawn to, whether it's because of history, personality, whatnot, that when I look at your company, I see a lot of elements of you. Like, do you find that while you were creating it, you just are kind of doing what we were saying and what Rick Rubin describes as creativity is dumping your expression, your perspective out into the project? Because that, to me, you and Studio Hot is a prime example of that. Is like, that is Nicole's perspective and that's her expression. Does it feel like that while you're creating it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for so long, I wasn't sure what I wanted to call it. I wasn't sure what I wanted it to look like. But as you know, I'm from Mexico City, and the colors and the textures and just everything to do with Mexican culture has been very much embedded in my own identity as a person. And it's also influenced my design style and my creative kind of outlook. But also I've grown up and lived in Canada for so long that I also have that kind of Canadian, North American aesthetic where I've worked with a lot of luxury brands, and I want to continue to. And so I wanted to kind of blend a very modern kind of editorial style, which is the style that I really enjoy working in, mixed in with that kind of Mexican flair. And I think that there's so much that I can say about the branding, but in general, as a person, I can be quite spicy, and I really wanted to inject that a little bit into the brand. And I wanted the brand to have a really memorable, easy name. So for a long time, I wanted Spanish sounding names, but people would not be able to pronounce them at all. And so I thought something really short, sweet, easy to remember. I'd always wanted matchboxes as business cards. I'd always seen restaurants have them, and I thought they were really cool, but I never really had a reason for a branding company to have matchboxes. But then when I thought of Studio Hot, I thought, well, that's perfect. And then that's kind of when the idea started to form. And in general, I think when something is hot, something is really well done. And I wanted to just make it so that people would want, let's say if they have an idea for a business or they already have a business, I want their brand to feel hot. Right. I want it to feel really cool or hot. And that's kind of the idea behind it. But yeah, I think that was my unique perspective. And I was very lucky when I had left my 9 to 5. I went to go visit my mom who lives in Mexico, and she was in Cabo. And I was able to design the brand while I was there. So I was just incredibly inspired by the world around me while I was there. And it was really helping. I was listening to Bad Bunny. There was the pool, there was the ocean right there. And it was just a perfect environment to create the brand.
Yeah. Environment is huge, and I've heard you talk about that, whether it's setting up your apartment in a certain way so that you feel compelled to create.
Yeah.
How satisfying is it to kind of express yourself on creative projects, like having your own personal business? Like, where is art in terms of the hierarchy of people's needs? We get satisfied when we eat. We're satisfied when other needs of ours are met. What about art? Do you think that is a need? Is that too much of a stretch, or do you think it's...
No, I think it's a need, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, of course, in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, shelter, food, safety, all that kind of stuff comes first, of course. But then once you have all of that, I think that art is incredibly important. When you think about even just 5 years ago, which I can't believe it's been 5 years, when COVID hit, what did people turn to during that time? They turned towards art. They started consuming TV shows, movies. They started baking. They started to read more books. Yeah. I got way more into reading. I mean, I already love to read, but I got way more into reading during that time.
Making podcasts.
You made a podcast during COVID. I think that it's just an example where when everything is going wrong, where do we find solace? And I do think that it is not just a nice to have, but it's very important. I mean, the world would be extremely boring without art and without creativity.
Yeah. I feel there's definitely something, just an instinctual drive within people to create. And I was thinking even about like the ancient humans who did cave paintings. They would just draw on the walls. And I mean, at that point, there's no likes, there's no subscribers. Like, you're not like, oh, I'm going to go viral with this cave painting of the baboon.
Leonardo da Vinci in the Sistine Chapel is talking about going viral.
Yeah, Leonardo. And I mean, even in that day and age, it's still like art had started to become popular, but let's rewind even like many thousands of years. There's just cave paintings of someone who decided, I just feel the need to express myself, and this feels like a great way to rub some stuff on the wall. And so I feel like that's just innate in many humans is there's a drive to eat, to reproduce, but there's also a drive, maybe not as powerful as eating and the others, but there is also a drive to express oneself and create. And I was finding I was really resonating with an idea that I heard that came from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, and it's the will to power. And what he meant by the will to power is not the will to have power over other people. It's the will to have power over yourself and be able to express yourself out into the world as maximally as possible. And when I heard him, when I realized that was one of his philosophies for life, is that it's not that human beings have a will to live. He kind of rejected that in favor of the will to power. So it's not that we're simply just trying to survive. We're trying to do a little bit more than that. We're trying to evolve, trying to grow, trying to struggle against the things that come at us in life. And that is what the will to power is. And some big examples of that are, and this is actually just what like ChatGPT spit out for the top people that represent the will to power well. One is the artist Frida Kahlo, and you know the story probably a little better than I am, but she's somebody who had some struggles and regardless still just found the strength, found the power to express herself regardless of those struggles. And do you want to kind of share the story of like what her struggles were? And actually you have some relations to her.
Relations to Frida Kahlo. Yeah, I mean, my great-grandpa was an orthodontist in Mexico City, and Frida Kahlo, before she was famous, didn't have enough money to get her ortho work done. And so she asked if she could trade paintings for getting the services for orthodontics. And my great-grandpa said yes. And so she was his patient. And yeah, Frida had a really difficult life. I don't know all the details, but she did get into an accident on a bus where I think something was broken in the bus and like went through her. And she was living with a chronic injury and chronic pain her entire life. And she's infamous for doing these self-portraits of herself. And a lot of it is, I think, her need to create out of pain in some ways and to kind of, I guess, soothe the pain that she was in. And then there was many other things that was happening in her marriage that kind of became very famous as well. She was married to Diego Rivera, who's a really famous painter as well. And her work is amazing, but I think her story resonates with a lot of people. And I think I can understand how somebody who's going through chronic pain and, let's say, a disability for the rest of your life, what else are you going to do but create art? I can understand that. And I do think that there is a correlation with mental health and with creative ability that goes hand in hand. And I do find that sometimes when I'm kind of in the lowest times of my life, I feel the most compelled to create for myself. So to write, I find great, not pleasure, that's not the word, but relief. I find a lot of relief in writing and in listening to music and singing and watching movies and just consuming and creating art when I'm going through a difficult time. I find that it's almost like a life raft in the middle of a storm.
Yeah, that really aligns actually with what you're saying about during COVID, that people pivoted a little bit more towards art than they usually would have. And maybe it's that isolation, that things aren't normal, things are a little bit more challenging, and so people are craving something to lift them up a little bit, and art does just that.
And they have the time. I think the biggest thing is that people that were kind of in that hamster wheel mentality for so long, the world for the first time just paused, and so they were able to have that time that I do find a lot of people might not create because they don't have the time. Let's say people that are new parents or they have lots of kids and they're working, it's really difficult to carve out that time for yourself. Right.
Yeah, and there's so many different forms of creativity that even, I mean, someone who's a new parent, they literally just created a new human being.
Yeah.
So there's that, but I'm sure there's ways that you can be probably, and I mean, I think a lot of parents would probably agree that their children draw out a bit of creativity from them, because children are innately so creative. They don't have the blocks.
No, they
don't have those inner blocks saying, oh, what if people don't like this, and they don't have the external blocks. Even like you, when you were a child, just drawing on your parents' walls, it's like you don't understand that that's not acceptable. So you just, you're flowing a lot more freely. And that's the idea, is like, how do we get to that stage where throughout our life we've been socialized, civilized, and now there's so many more kind of bumps in the roads and potholes. And so we can't move as smoothly, as freely as we used to be able to when we were a child.
No, definitely not. I remember the texture of the walls was just so exciting for me when I had, let's say, pencils or pens. I just remember even the sound of hitting the wall with the paint was the most exciting to me when I was a kid. It was just like the perfect canvas.
Yeah, everything's new when you're a child, and so everything's fascinating. And that's what Rick Rubin recommended in his book, is try to cultivate the beginner's mind as best as you can. And even in the artist's way, very, very similar thing, is there's something super valuable in having a beginner's mind. And you can practice being a beginner by doing new things. And even in the artist's way, she recommended just do things that you typically don't do. And the barrier for your to entry will eventually be reduced. And so she even said things like, learn to play piano, try to do a marathon, try to do all these things. And what ends up happening, and I feel like I've even experienced this a little bit in my life as I've tried new things, from like kickboxing, podcasting to doing a marathon, is you enter the thing as a beginner with a little bit of a different mindset, because you've witnessed yourself go from absolute beginner to fairly competent and decent at the thing. Next time you enter something else as a beginner, you have that in your backpack of, well, I know that I can progress. Yeah. And so it's way less scary, and the blocks just aren't there. So I think whether someone wants to start learning guitar, but they're too scared to do it, or learn to sing, or whatever it is, something that they feel like, oh no, I'm embarrassed to do it. Try learning other new things. Try going into new fields and get skilled at being a beginner. Yeah. Because there is a challenge in being a beginner. You show up as a beginner in a class and you're like, oh God, I don't know what I'm doing. Everyone thinks I suck at this. But if you get good at being able to handle that itself is a very valuable skill.
It's extremely valuable. And I think it also just sharpens your ability to be open to failure, whatever that means. So I started dancing. I was a dancer growing up, but I quit for a really long time and I went back into it in my mid-20s. So going back into a dance studio in Vancouver with 18-year-olds that are professional dancers next to me, and I would be forced to perform at the very end. I remember at first it was, extremely intimidating, and the more that I went, the less it mattered. And the less I cared that I wasn't as good as everybody around me, and I was just able to have more fun and also see that progression of getting better. Even if you don't get to a point where you're advanced or whatever, it's still really great to be able to see that advancement. And I also think that it allows you to gain inspiration from a variety of different places. And I've kind of always thought of that in my work, that I really love to get inspiration from the world around me. I don't like to just get inspiration from, let's say, other branding studios or other graphic design, let's say magazines or books. I like to get inspiration from a color of a flower outside, or the shape of a building, or when you and I went to Europe, seeing the different menu cards and the different signage, and, let's say a pattern on somebody's dress. Those little things can really It's almost like a rich tapestry of inspiration that you can take whenever you need it. And I think it's even something that we talked about before, about how there was this writer who said that a writer will have enough creative material to last them a lifetime by the time they're 18. So if you live really fully and really colorfully, you will have enough creative material to write for the rest of your life at 18 years old. And so if you take that and you live your life as fully as possible, you travel, you see new places, you meet new people, you try new things, you go to different classes, you're a beginner over and over and over again, eventually you're going to have just a massive amount of material to be able to draw from when you are creating.
Right.
No matter what it might be.
I really like the idea of treating consuming information and content similar like you would consuming food, and that just like you might be cautious of the food you're eating and you go on a certain diet because you want to be healthy, you want to be sharp, all these things. I think the same applies to when you're consuming information and content. There's certain content and information that's going to be far more nurturing to you and then allow you to create at a higher level. Just like an athlete is going to eat certain foods and allow him to perform at a higher level. If someone wants to create at their highest level, if you're consuming certain types of things, like let's say you spend 10 hours a day on TikTok watching certain...
Which I still do sometimes.
Yeah, and some time on it is fine, but like compare that to somebody who's doing similar to, as you said, they're out and about in the world. They're noticing things. They're making a particular point of it to try to pay attention to designs all around the world. They're talking to people. They're reading like great works. That is a type of information diet that is drastically different than if you're watching just 10 hours of the same stuff on TikTok.
Definitely.
And so I think definitely be mindful of what are you consuming, because your level, your creative ability is going to hinge a lot on the type of things you're consuming.
And the quality. I think it's almost, if you want to be a really good writer, you have to be a really good reader.
Yeah.
If you want to be a great actor, you have to watch the best movies of all time. If you want to be a great podcast host, you need to listen to the best podcasts in the world. So I think it's consuming the greats and allowing that to inspire you. I think that's even something that Rick Rubin said in The Creative Act about how when the Beach Boys came out with Pet Sounds, Paul McCartney was so inspired by Pet Sounds that he was playing it over and over again when the Beatles were writing Sgt. Pepper's album.
Right.
And it's interesting because there are certain songs, I don't know if it's on that album, but Here, There, and Everywhere by the Beatles reminds me so much of the Beach Boys, not in a copyright kind of way, but just in the way that the melodies and the way that they're harmonizing with each other. I know that I love that song so much because I love the Beach Boy sound.
Right.
And it's kind of cool that Paul McCartney, one of the best musicians of all time, was so inspired by the Beach Boys that he used that as his creative inspiration to create his masterpiece. So it just kind of shows that Paul McCartney was consuming quality music, and it allowed him to come out with another iconic album that was completely different and came from his unique perspective, but was still sparked by that.
Right. Yeah, I think there's something amazing about trying to find the beauty in other people's art, especially art and different genres from the type of thing that you want to create. Mm-hmm. So let's say you're a painter, you could still get inspiration from a musician or a dancer. There's certain things or at least a certain energy about the creator that you can get inspired by. Absolutely. So if you see a dancer that's just in the flow, they seem to have defeated the resistance and the blocks just aren't there. A painter might watch that and say, wow, like I would love to be able to create that seamlessly when I'm put the brush on the canvas. And I think a lot of this just comes back to looking around at the world with an openness and an attentiveness where you see things and you're open to the perspectives, like, oh, maybe I could learn something from that, or maybe that is a better way of doing it. And that's the vibe that I get from Rick Rubin, is that he's just extremely open. He'll take in so much information, and that's kind of what he describes some of the best creatives as, is someone who's very sensitive. And the analogy he gave is that they're like an antenna, and they just have a great ability at picking up a lot of signals. And do you think that like sensitivity is something that leads to a more effective artist, or at least an artist who's able to create more? And how do you manage sensitivity in terms of, it can sometimes hurt? I mean, sensitivity, that's what people often think about, is like, oh, they could get damaged easily, they could get hurt easily. How do you manage that with also knowing that you want to tap into your sensitivity to create some of the best art that you can?
I think I've always been incredibly sensitive. And even I think there's a new term, as there always is with mental health stuff, highly sensitive people. I think that's a term. Yeah. And I've self-diagnosed myself that. I don't know if it's true, but I do think that people that are highly sensitive have that capacity to create and perhaps be more creative, or in general have that antenna to be able to like tap into their creativity. I think that it's a double-edged sword, like most things. I might be extremely sensitive, so the smallest thing might really hurt, but also I'm extremely sensitive, so I'm able to really feel my emotions extremely deeply, and that's good emotions and bad emotions. And I think with any work of art, it does need to evoke emotion. So sometimes if I'm listening to a Taylor Swift album, I will be bawling my eyes out, or listening to Defying Gravity for the 100th millionth time and singing it in the car. That, I'm not joking, I've cried singing that song, and it's because it's an emotionally evocative song. There's even viral
I've cried
videos
as well, actually.
You've
when
cried
you're singing it.
You cried?
When you sing it, yeah, because my ears are just, they're ringing. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
permanently
damaged.
deaf on the right side.
Yeah, I'm crying in pain. But I have sensitive ears, I guess.
Yeah, very sensitive. But
yeah,
you do what you got to do for the art.
People react differently to the same art.
Well, even I think there's viral videos of dogs that are howling to certain songs that evoke a lot of emotion.
Right.
Like that Whitney Houston song, I can't remember the name of it, but there's so many dogs like howling and feeling the emotion of the song. And I really do think that people are the same. And I think it's almost embracing that sensitivity. I think that it makes me care more. And I think that when I care more, then it means that the work is going to be really good. If I don't care about the work, it may not be as good. So I hope to always care, and I hope to always be sensitive, even if I'm crying while I'm making it. I think that it's just a really beautiful way to express yourself and to tap into that. And it's also, like we were talking about, I do think that it's a form of medicine. It's a way of letting it out.
Yeah.
And I think taking certain circumstances in your life that may be less than ideal and turning it into art might be the way to go. It might be better than antidepressants in some ways. It's to create and to let it out. And then other people will resonate with that. A lot of people say that poetry doesn't matter, that it's, fruitful, that it doesn't, nobody really cares about poetry until a loved one dies or you get your heart broken. And then that's when you turn to poetry, and that's when you consume it and want to write it. Not for everybody, of course, but I do think that a lot of the time art can be dismissed until you really need it.
Yeah, and different forms of art. Like Rick, I've heard him comment on, someone was asking him like, oh, well, what art is better? An art that is coming from a place of joy, or art that's coming from a place of sadness or depression or whatever? And he said, they're all equally as good. It just depends on what you're kind of feeling at the time. I mean, what art really is, and this is more his words and not mine, but it's the expression of a perspective. Art has a perspective. It allows you to tap into that poet's perspective, when they wrote a poem about maybe somebody passing away, or when someone wrote a song about the most joyful day of their life. You tap into that perspective, and that's what's so amazing. And you gave the example earlier about the Beatles taking inspiration from the Beach Boys, and it made me think of the saying that I've heard before, which is steal like an artist. And I think there is something to that, like at least get inspiration from other artists. But if you fully copy, you're not going to have the perspective that is what makes art what it is.
Yeah.
People want to hear your unique perspective. And so as much as you might think like, oh, I think this is what people want to hear, and so I'm going to try to craft myself so that I end up producing that, it's probably less likely to land than if you just stuck with your own perspective. And these days with the internet and our ability to communicate all throughout cities and countries, there's probably some people that are going to like your unique style, your unique perspective. And so it's always going to be better off trying that, because then you're going to satisfy your own inner feeling of being compelled to create art. But if you copy, if you kind of just try to do what the market wants, you're not gonna scratch that itch, and you're still gonna feel that craving to actually express yourself genuinely.
Exactly.
And when I mentioned that will to power thing, does that resonate with you at all? Because I find that really resonated with me, and I really felt like that was exactly how I felt when I wanted to create the podcast. Is that it felt like something that I was curious to do, something that I wanted to do, but also something that I felt like I kind of need to do this. I won't feel good about myself if I don't do it. And I think if I could recommend anything for anybody listening, is try to be attuned to that thing in you. What is that thing that you feel like you're compelled to do? And it might not necessarily be something that we traditionally think of as art, but whatever that is, definitely try to follow that, because I think that the satisfaction at the end of that path is massive. And that dissatisfaction or frustration from not fulfilling that isn't really going to go away. And I remember reading from The Artist's Way, the book about creativity. She was saying that the pain of not following your desire to create is going to be way more than the pain of following it. And the pain of following it is what she's saying is, okay, well, you're gonna have to sit down and actually do the work. And so there's a lot of difficulty, discipline, persistence involved in doing the work. But at the end of the day, that pain is less than you doing nothing. And I just really felt that super strongly when I created, wanted to start the podcast. Have you felt like a similar deep drive, like when you're creating Studio Hot, your business, or even just in other endeavors, whether it's art, like art, quote unquotes, or not?
Absolutely. I think it's constantly on my mind. And for a long time, I think I let outside pressures and in general just life pressures of needing to pay the bills and everything kind of keep me stuck in the 9-to-5 grind. And I know what that feels like. And I think for a long time I just thought, well, if I do this, then how am I going to pay my rent, and how am I going to do this? But I do think that once you decide, and I had decided, I don't want to work for anybody else anymore. I truly want to be self-employed. I want to be able to work the way that I want to work, and not just to create a design studio, but create a design studio so then I have also the flexibility to do other things that I really want to do, like travel or write or, pursue other kind of creative outlets. I do think that it is pushing that resistance, and the way that I was able to do that is burning my boats in order to cross that path. And it was terrifying. You were there. You helped me through the entire thing. And I do think that you kind of go through like an ego death where you're panicking and you don't know what you're doing. And I think that it's so important, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And there was stresses when I was working a 9-to-5 job, when I was a corporate girl, And now there are stresses now that I'm an entrepreneur, self-employed, but those stresses are nothing compared to the stresses of working a 9 to 5, because I don't think I was following what I wanted to be doing. I wasn't following the path that I wanted to be on. So even though I'm in a more challenging path now, those challenges are welcome right now. If anything, I love the types of challenges that it's coming with this path, because I'm on the path that I want to be on.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Nietzsche describes as the will to power. Is you're pushing up against the struggle, and like we said about Frida Kahlo, she had to kind of battle those injuries. And another example, when you search like who is a good example of someone who represents the will to power, ChatGPT spit out Socrates, which was a guy like an ancient philosopher who was kind of stirring the pot a little bit in amongst the people in power in his city. I think it was Athens. But I might be wrong on that, but let's say Athens. And they were going to condemn him to death because of the things that he was preaching and teaching amongst the people of Athens. And they said, you need to stop expressing yourself, stop doing the things that you're doing, otherwise we're going to execute you. And I think he took a little bit of time, and he ended up coming back and making a decision saying, yeah, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. And they did execute him, but he just felt like, I don't want to deviate from my path, no matter what pressures come up against me in life, even if it's someone saying that we're going to kill you. And so he's obviously a super extreme example, but I think that's the mentality of somebody maximally expressing their will to power is, regardless of the things that they face, they're going to keep pushing on. And there's something deeply satisfying in doing that. And another example they gave is of David Goggins, who is like a super...
Not so much of an artist, but...
Not so much of an artist, but someone who represents will to power, like, to a T, because he basically, what he did, I mean, for people who don't know his story, it's like a guy who was like over 300 pounds. His life wasn't going super well.
Oh, I didn't know that he was 300 pounds.
Yeah, he worked a job where he was spraying cockroaches. He felt like he was a loser. He felt like he was, and he'll say this, he's like, I was a fat loser. Nothing was going for me.
If anybody clips this out of context.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this is how he was talking to himself. And he also just had a very difficult upbringing. His dad was extremely abusive, would beat him, would beat his mom. He grew up in a town where he was one of the only black guys in a white neighborhood. They would spray paint the N-word on his car. And horrible. He just had so many things going against him, and he felt like he was worthless. But he decided to wage war on himself so that he could evolve and so that he could transform. And so this is exactly what the will to power is you're trying to maximally express your power, and you often inevitably are going to have to do so against great struggles. So he completely transformed himself, and now he is a far more powerful, influential person, not because he aimed to get power over other people, but because he aimed to get power over himself.
Yeah.
So he went from a guy who was fairly overweight, didn't work a job that he wanted to. He just didn't respect himself. He said he would cheat on all his tests. He never felt good about the stuff he was doing. He said he lied all the time. He just didn't like himself. And so he waged war against himself, ended up becoming a Navy SEAL and then running ultra marathon races. And so that was his unique path for conquering himself and becoming someone who can maximally express themselves to the best of their ability. David Goggins, from when he was 18 or 20 or whatever it was, when he was spraying cockroaches, he didn't have much power in the world. He didn't have any power over himself. And so I felt like me pursuing the podcast was an example of that. Is like, if I'm able to get better at podcasting, I'll have greater abilities. And so trying to master my abilities and master my fears allows you to be able to express yourself in a better way, and then in turn get more power. And not that the goal is power, it's not, but it's mainly inner power. Yeah, exactly.
It's not power over other people. And I think that is the biggest thing too, is that anybody out there that wants to create something for themselves, the competition is not other people. The competition is with yourself. 100%. It's you against you every single day. And that's how I feel every single day when I go to work. When I start, my job, I'm not looking at what other people are doing. If anything, it's okay. Are you going to focus, and are you going to fight against the resistance? For those that we haven't explained the War of Art, who is it that wrote the War of Art?
Stephen Pressfield. And
he talks about how every single day he is faced with resistance, not just him, but everybody in the world. And the resistance is making it very difficult for you to create. And every single day he sits down and he forces himself to create no matter what. And he has his routines, and he talks about how the resistance can come up in many different ways. It can look like many different things. It could be other people, it could be yourself, it could be, manifesting in many different ways. But the whole point is that there's a resistance to create, and you must overcome it. You're not unique for having this resistance. It's normal. And when we were talking to people about doing this podcast, and we were asking them if they've ever felt that, it seems like everybody we've spoken to feels that. Even your brothers, who have come out with so many different albums, and they're musicians, they've been musicians forever, and they still feel that resistance every day.
Yeah. And I think that's super important for people to know, because like sometimes it can feel like, oh God, like this resistance is insurmountable. And I feel like surely the people I see creating can't possibly be feeling that. And to be fair, there's going to be unique levels, unique challenges from person to person, and what's blocking them might not be blocking another person, but everybody has their blocks. And Rick Rubin gave some examples of musicians he knows that they have created music for 50 years, and even now they still get nervous, sick to their stomach before they go on stage. But they overcome that block every single time, because the drive to create is more powerful than the blocks that are in their way.
Yeah. And that's even how I feel when I go to a dance class. The power within me to express myself far outweighs the embarrassment of messing up or performing in front of people that are like 100 times better than me. Mm-hmm. I would rather fall flat in front of my face in front of all these insanely talented 18-year-olds than to not go to class at all. I would so much rather that. And it's because I feel this sense of empowerment when I'm in class. I feel like I'm able to express myself at the highest level. And it's kind of going back to what you're talking about when you're a kid, and when you're completely free from judgment and from people's opinions, and you don't really care. I remember my biggest dream was to be Britney Spears. That's all it was. They said, what do you want to be when you grow up? Everyone's like, doctor, lawyer, man. I said Britney Spears. I wanted to be Britney Spears. And so now at 29 years old, I'll go to a class and I feel the most authentic when I'm at a dance class, because I feel like I'm Britney Spears. And that's how, that is okay. I'm realizing that that's almost the key to life, is to go back to the joys that I felt when I was little, when I didn't care what anybody thought of me. And it's still true to this day when I'm an adult. And I want that to continue. I want to be the old lady with gray hair in a dance class. I want to be that person. I want to continue to do the things that bring me joy, no matter what people think. And I think that is the ultimate key.
Yeah. Going back to your childhood, I think is great advice for people struggling to tap into their creativity. Maybe life has kind of beaten them down in a sense, or kind of the mundaneness or their routine, the repetition has kind of zapped them of that creative spirit, and they feel like they've lost that. Like they're now sitting there saying, well, I don't know, I haven't created anything in years. I don't feel like I've had that. Try your best to remember the days when you were a child and you just naturally would have wanted to create certain things, and probably were drawn to a certain realm of things, similar like you, with where it was kind of pop star type things. Like you wanted to dance, you wanted to sing, you wanted to to do those things. For other people, it's going to be different things. But if you can maybe flip through a child photo book, whatever it takes to get yourself to remember that creative spirit that you had in you as a child, it's probably still there. It's just, it's gotten buried by the other things that happen in life. And it's just natural. But for sure, for somebody struggling to tap into it, I think that can really help. Like I've tried to tap into like how I felt as a child, and I think that can really draw things out of you. Like for me, I was always just really passionate about animals, and I think there's an energy there that it just, whether it even has anything to do with art, I think there's just something about allowing yourself to tap into the things that you just naturally felt as a child. I think
and
that's
having fun and joy. That's, yeah. I think you even asked me that earlier, and I didn't really think of the answer until now, but tapping into your inner joy, it's so important. Or play, having fun, just playing. When you're a kid and you're at the beach and you're playing with what you have or with the people you're with, it's just that sense of wonder and that sense of fun. And I think that is when the best creative ideas come, is when you're playing. Sometimes when I do meetings, I like to think of them as blue sky meetings where no idea is too crazy, because you can always X out the ideas that aren't going to happen later. But I love to think of the blue sky thinking, where if anything were possible, what could we do, for this campaign or for this project? And it's so much fun to come up with all of the ideas. And it's because you're just having fun. You're not thinking about the execution part of it. And then that allows you to really open up your mind. So I do want to answer that question now, is just think with a blue sky in mind. Just don't have any limits at first, and then later you can refine it. But starting off with nothing is off limits. Yeah,
that's some of the best advice that I ever got. Like, it was specifically directed at making calls, like for business calls.
Yeah.
Which is a different realm. But I found, somebody said to me, they said, just have fun with it.
No topics off limits. Just ask them anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess there's, well, I guess it depends how you're dealing with it at first. Like, if you find like you're being a little bit too rigid and cautious, and like, me, I can be like fairly like diplomatic, almost like overly, like when I'm talking to like, I don't know, the people at like stores or whatever, like things like that. And so for me, that was at least good. That was definitely good advice.
Yeah.
Just have fun with it. And so I loosened up like a notch or two, and I found that, wow, I actually could be better at this than I thought, just because that constraint and that strictness was actually limiting my ability to express myself. And just a simple have fun with it, that really, really got stuck in my head, and I found that was really, really helpful.
It does. It changes everything. Even at dance, sometimes I'll be thinking about the moves and I'm about to perform, and I can get so in my head. But when I truly actually remind myself to have fun, that's when I legitimately do a better job. And I think that has something to do with being present too. When you're not present, I feel like you are resisting. So it's like, you want to do this project, you want to create something, but you're in your head, you're not really present. So when you are present, you are able to create. And I think that's kind of when we talk about being in the zone, is when you are completely present, when time and space is no longer even part of your existence at that point. You just are present and you are creating.
Yeah. And a lot of this comes back to Rick Rubin describing that, like, his main purpose in the studio is to get the people not thinking about the outcome. And I mean, that's a similar thing that happened to me when I was taking the call, and somebody recommended just have fun with it, is you stop worrying so much about and trying to like analyze, like, if this happens then this and all this stuff. You just kind of go with the flow, and you're not worried about the outcome. And I do want to say this about Rick Rubin, because I was fascinated, still am fascinated by his level of play. Even when he first started, he talks about when he was first making music, he was kind of like entering into a newer genre. It was like a certain style of rap, and he just wanted to make music because he really liked it and he knew his friends liked it and it was just fun for him. And whenever anybody's asked him like, hey, were you worried about whether people were going to like it? Were you worried about what the audience was going to think? He's like shocked and kind of baffled by the question. Even he's like, no, of course, no, I didn't even think about it at all.
Yeah.
And just him answering that, I'm like, wow, it's just a next level of not concerned at all.
There's no chalance.
It's
absolutely none.
Zero chalance is involved.
Zero chalance.
It's just pure flow and pure, I want to create this because it's fun for me. And
that might be the key.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about that too with Bob Dylan, how I recently watched A Great Unknown, that Timothée Chalamet played Bob Dylan. And at the end, they talked about how Bob Dylan, I can't remember the amount of albums, but it was something like hundreds of albums he's come out with in his lifetime. And he is the type of person, I never really knew what his personality was like. I was always a fan of his music, but I never understood what he was like. And from the movie, I gathered that he was the type of guy that really did not give a fuck. He didn't care. He really didn't care about what people thought of his music, about what people thought of him. He just felt that need to create. And I think that is why he's pumped out so many albums in his lifetime. It's not for other people. It's not even for money. And it's not for praise or any of that. For a long time, he was a folk musician. And then when he started veering off from that genre and started doing rock, everybody was upset with him. His record label, the producers, everyone was saying, you're a folk musician. He said, I'm just a musician. You can't peg me into one small space. And he ended up being one of the greatest of all time, still is. And he's the first artist to win a Nobel Prize on literature, and he didn't even show up to the award, which is crazy. If I got a Nobel Prize, I would invite everybody I know just because it's such a massive honor. But for him, he doesn't care, which makes it even cooler and even better because you can tell that he's not doing it for any kind of validation, any kind of nothing. It's just... he just wants to create music and that's all he wants to do. And I find Taylor Swift might be a little different, but I do find a lot of inspiration from her with the amount of music that she comes out with. And she just constantly says how she just wants to keep doing this forever. And she's just she's very thankful for her fans because she's able to continue to do it and to do what she loves.
Yeah, like the reward of getting to create, I guess to Bob Dylan is way more valuable than any prize reward someone could give him.
Yeah, exactly. And also it even shows that he didn't even want to veer off. He wanted to veer off and he didn't even want to be controlled creatively. Whereas a lot of artists might, listen to the producers and say, okay, yeah, you're right. I was very successful as a folk musician. I'll continue writing folk music. I will stick to this because that is what I'm good at.
Right.
And I think it's just incredibly cool that he was able to defy that and just continue on his way.
Yeah.
My brother even said this to me. I can't remember what the context was, but when it comes to creativity, my brother's very, very creative. And he was saying that there's something about being... or what was the term?
Sexy indifference.
Sexy indifference. Yeah. And I wrote it down because I just found it so powerful. And I think that is the key, is having that indifference. And because you're indifferent, you are sexy. So Rick, if you're out there, you are sexy. Bob.
Shout out
Taylor.
Rick. Shout out Bob. Shout out Alan too for
thank you, Alan, for that.
Yeah, and I think as long as it's truly genuine indifference, because you can't put it on as a front of like, an insincere resistance will easily be spotted and will not be sexy.
No, if you're trying to be indifferent, you're not being indifferent.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I mean, to be indifferent would just be try to listen to that voice that we've been talking about, how people are compelled to create. It might be very quiet, but what is it that you specifically want to express and create, and try to follow that? And I think that'll change over time, like you said, for a lot of these artists. And I think the greatest artists are so good at starting all over again. They'll start from scratch. They'll climb the mountain all over again, and they'll be a beginner. And they have no problem doing that because, like, what Rick Rubin has said is the purpose a lot of the time for creating and finally publishing and putting out that project is to allow you to move on to the next project, because that creative stream within you is going to continue to flow. And if you get stuck on a project and you let the resistance get to you, you're scared of releasing it, you block yourself from the next project and the next project and the next project. So just continue to flow. And once you release it, then it's in the hands of the audience, the interpreters, and let the audience do the interpreting. That's not your job.
It's not.
For whatever you're creating. And that's not meant to sound like arrogant. It's just meant to sound that like the creative focus is important. You can't be thinking and doing all sorts of roles. The audience will interpret it and different people will interpret it in different ways, but your main goal is to focus on the creation.
Yeah.
And I think that Rick Rubin's advice on that is just super spot on. So anybody that is thinking of getting the book Creative Act, it's a brilliant book.
I also think that it is important to, like you said, it's not up to you how it gets interpreted. Mm-hmm. It's important to just continually remind yourself that art is subjective.
Yeah.
You can create a masterpiece of a movie and 50% of people will come out of the movie saying it's the greatest movie they've seen of all time. And other people say it's the biggest waste. They need to get their money back.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift is one of the biggest, I keep bringing her up because love her, but she's one of the biggest artists of all time. And there's so many people in the world that hate her music, hate her guts, hate everything about her. And then there's an equal amount of people that love everything about her, that find her music as moving and beautiful, myself included. And I think that's just a really great example. It's kind of like, you know, that age-old metaphor of you might be the juiciest peach in the world, but there's always going to be someone out there that hates peaches.
Right.
And that doesn't make you a stupid, ugly peach. It just makes you a juicy, delicious peach.
Yeah.
And
that might be what that person comments on your thing is that you're a stupid, ugly peach.
Yeah.
But that's fine. The job
That's
of the
okay.
interpreter, that person's interpretation, you did your part. You created and
if
and that's
anything,
it.
I'm excited for one day to have haters. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
excited to get to the point where people care enough to hate.
Yeah,
I
because
think
that is a level that you're only kind of creating at a high level once people start
to hate your guts.
criticizing and hating.
Even Rick Rubin gets criticized like crazy online. There's been so many memes that I've seen of him that make me laugh, that are funny, that are about creative directors and all this kind of stuff. But he is one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
And
Nobody's free of it.
nobody is free of it.
And Rick's point about he says that like for that artist who wants to create and is also concerned about money as well, which is going to be a thing for a lot of artists. You say, well, okay, you guys are talking about how we got to follow our dreams, follow that inner voice that's telling us to create, but it's not making me any money, and how am I going to manage? How am I going to survive? All these things. Yeah, there are real practical challenges, but at the end of the day, don't try to deviate from your artist drive by focusing on what the market's going to want. Rick recommends that if you're going to create art and you also simultaneously want to make money from it, treat them as two separate roles. There's art and there's commerce, and they shouldn't be mixed. When you're creating art, you're entirely in the art lane, and then you can think about commerce at a different time. But if you're thinking about commerce while you're creating, you're thinking about the outcomes, and that's going to prevent you from creating at your maximally. Yeah. I also really like something that Naval Ravikant said, is that create something great and the network will come. He says that networking is overrated because typically if you just focus on creating a really great product, the network will come to you. And so I find that advice, it sticks, and I feel like it resonates as something to be true.
Yeah, it kind
because
of
you
goes...
can network all you want, but if you have nothing, no creation, no product, no value to bring, then you're just handing out business cards and nothing really comes of it. But if you focus on just creating, the network will come.
Yeah, and it's kind of that same saying of don't chase, attract.
Mm-hmm.
You might be chasing a butterfly for hours on end in a garden trying to catch it, but then if you just sit and you make a really beautiful garden, the butterflies will come. I think that it's a similar thing, and it's really difficult to think of it day to day, but it's something to always be reminded by, that you are attracting what you are already. So focusing on what you're creating will attract the opportunities that you seek. For example, there's this girl online that was saying how she's a visual artist, and for a long time she was having a really hard time making money from it. Mm-hmm. Because she wasn't selling the prints and people weren't buying her work. And then one day somebody said to her, hey, do you mind making a piece of art for me that was my first date with my partner? I really want to gift it to him for Valentine's Day or something. So she made a really beautiful piece of art of the first date spot for this couple. And then another couple came to her being like, oh, can you do that for me? And then she created a business just from that. She makes pieces of art of somebody's first date spot, which is so incredible. And now she has hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, and they came to her. She wasn't stopping couples on the street being like, hey, do you want a piece of art from the first date? People were asking her because it's a really brilliant, unique product.
Yeah. And people love those stories like more than any other like creation story or business story. As somebody who had no intention of making money off it. They were just following what they wanted to do. They were just making art, and they decided that they're going to do that unique style where they create a drawing of the first date. And next thing you know, they've got a business. And yeah, I don't know. I just like those stories more than anything else. Like the guy who just loves making pizza and he starts a pizza shop or whatever. It's just when there's some passion at the bottom of it, and they just, regardless of what the market was saying or the world was saying, maybe people said, oh, that'll never lead to anything. They just followed it and it turned out. I do want to flip over a little bit to trying to nurture creativity in children. And shout out to my sister Kaylee. She wanted us to when I asked her what she would want to hear in a podcast about creativity, because she's so focused on being a great parent to her children, the first thing that came to her mind was, how can I nurture and foster creativity in children? And how do you think that's possible? Like, do you think that there's certain nurture, like nature nurture leads to a creative person? What are the things that matter on the nurture side?
I think that not shutting down kids when they're being creative is number one. I think really, like, what's a word when you want to like stoke the flame of something?
Right. Yeah, you're kind of encouraging.
Yeah, encourage creativity in your kids. If they're saying, Mom, I saw a mermaid in the water and she was beautiful. She was swimming. Don't say, you didn't see a mermaid. That's unrealistic. There's no such thing as mermaid. Say, oh, what did she look like? What color tail did she have? Where did she come from? What do you think her name is? I think asking those questions and really kind of stoking that flame is really important, just because I can imagine as a kid, at least for me, I think my parents really encouraged it. Anytime I was being creative or saying weird things, they would encourage it. And I think that really helped me continue to want to.
Right.
And I think also my parents would, let's say if I made a piece of art, like my mom would keep it and she would put it on the wall. And she made it seem like it was important, even though it may not have been. Right. So I think that is a key.
Yeah, nurture and cherish their imagination and creativity.
Yeah.
Because if you shut down their imagination in that situation with the mermaid, the difference is basically like they bring that up and picture like a plant, and that mermaid idea is like a plant, and you can either water it and give it sunlight and allow that to grow, and encourage seeds and more plants to grow in the future. Or when that mermaid idea comes up, it's like a weed and you just rip it out of the ground, and then that's the end of that. And then next thing going forward, that child might be more hesitant, even in their own mind. And that's part of what I read in the Rick Rubin book, is that, and same with The Artist's Way, is that a lot of these inner blocks, they may not even be your own voice.
Yeah.
These are other people's voices that have been established in your mind, and they tell you, oh, you're not creative, you're not good at this, no one's gonna like that, your ideas are weird. All these voices that you're telling yourself, they may have just come from things that you've heard other people tell you throughout your lifetime. And so that, or like the origin of that is as a child, and children are especially sensitive and especially receptive to picking up beliefs and habits. So I think we got to be extra careful that you're nurturing their creativity and not shutting them down, not making them believe that they're not capable of creating.
And if they want to try a creative hobby, if you have the funds, being able to enroll them in something. So like my parents always put me in dance class or acting class, or, you know, I think I did cello at one point, which was not for me. It was for my mom. She wanted me to play cello because my grandpa did too. And I didn't like it. And then she said, okay, you don't have to anymore. And then trying a bunch of different mediums, I think, is important, and I think can really ignite that creativity in your child if they feel drawn towards something. I think that's really important, to not shut it down, but to nurture it and allow them to explore that. And then once they're not into it anymore, don't force them. I used to do ice skating as a kid, and I really didn't like it after a while, and my parents didn't force me to stay in it. There are times where, for instance, dance, I wish that I wouldn't have given up on it. I wish I would have continued, but at that point I didn't want to continue, and so they didn't make me stay in something that I didn't want to. I think that could also be a key way of maybe not stifling creativity, but if you're doing something and you're no longer feeling joy from it or satisfaction, and then you're still pushing through it, that might make you resent that creative outlet. So it's no longer an outlet, it's more of a chore. So I think just making sure that it doesn't feel like a chore, even though you have to push through the resistance. At the end of the day, you know yourself, you know if you need to create something and if you're enjoying it, even if you feel that resistance. But there's a big difference between the resistance and no longer enjoying something, and you can tell the difference.
Yeah, for sure. You're gonna have to learn like your own mind's tricks, because sometimes like I'll try to rationalize my way out of doing the work, like like maybe today's not a good day, I could start tomorrow. You start procrastinating, tomorrow, or even this
podcast, we had to get creative with the setup for the podcast.
We
were so close to not doing it.
Yeah, very close. I mean, I was in a dark place like about an hour before the podcast started. My camera, it was sitting on this table, and I went to unplug my laptop charger to move my computer, and I pulled the cord out, hit the camera, it fell on the ground, the lens cracked. We looked on ChatGPT, can you fix this? It said, God, no, you're done for. You need to replace the lens. And there seemed to be no way to fix it. It doesn't work. Like the camera wasn't working. And so, I mean, hopefully the quality is still top notch. I think it should be. Got the 4K iPhone shooting instead of the camera.
But the resistance could have gotten to you. You could have been, okay, we don't have the best quality camera for one of the angles, so we're not doing the podcast anymore.
Right.
But instead, got creative with the setup. We're using an iPhone now for one of them, and we're continuing on. And I think that I think that does actually segue to a good point, is that I think a lot of people wait until they have the best materials or the best equipment, or, you know, I'm not going to start dancing until I have like the perfect shoes, or I'm not going to start running until I have the running vest and all the gels, and I'm not going to start a podcast until I have the very best, equipment. I'm not going to I'm not going to start painting until I have the best watercolors in the world. I think that, yes, of course, a tool is necessary. You do need your tools, but you don't need to wait until you have the highest quality, best tools and equipment. You can start with whatever you have and then go from there.
You're almost never ready. Like every time I've ever done a podcast, I always feel like I could have prepared way more. There's always more that could be done, but there's just a certain point at which it just needs to happen and you just need to go for it.
And I think that is a really good point that I do want to say for anybody listening that is really compelled to create but having a really hard time to. I think that for a long time, and I still struggle with this, but for a long time I struggled with perfectionism and not being ready to actually share the creation of what I'm making because it's not perfect. And then I would overthink it. I would start over from the very beginning. And just many times I just felt like it wasn't good enough. And so I just didn't. And then, you know, talking to you and making the decision to go self-employed, I was listening to a lot of podcasts and reading a lot of books. And the main common thread that I was finding throughout all of these mediums was to start before you're ready. You're never going to be ready. And to start imperfectly, and that done is better than perfect, and that you can continue to evolve it.
Yeah.
But there was a saying that I kept saying, and I can't remember it now, but it was one specific saying about how you have to just go for it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the exact saying was that you're thinking of, but there's one that I've heard before, which is start badly.
Yeah.
Which, like, no matter what you start, you just kind of got to start and not be good at the thing. It's just kind of natural. And so start, it won't be perfect, start badly, because at the end of the day, you might, if that's a block for you where you say, oh, I don't want to start because I don't think I'm going to be good at this. I don't feel like I can, when I compare myself to the people who've been doing this longer or maybe have more innate talent, I'm just not there yet. Picture yourself on two different timelines. There's the you that starts and eventually progresses, and the you that never starts. And let's fast forward 10 years for both of them. The you 10 years will be at the exact same spot because you never started. And the other you will maybe 10 years in have got like close to the 10,000 hours and you're an expert, you're a master in the thing.
Yeah.
And so that's an inner block that, you shouldn't let yourself get to, even no matter how old you are. Because, like, I mean, a lot of people, I think, let age stop them from doing certain things. So, like, oh, I'm too young or I'm too old. Well, if you think you're too old to start the thing, how much older are you going to be next year or 5 years, 10 years? I mean, you'll be just that much older, but you still have not done the thing and still haven't developed the skills or whatever. So
exactly.
It's just, it doesn't make sense when you really think about it. But I get it. It can be uncomfortable to be the only one who's a different age in the dance class,
but there's always someone that is doing it. You might be thinking to yourself, oh, I'm too old to start dancing. And then you'll see a 40-year-old in a dance class killing it. And
you often respect them the most because you get a sense like there probably was some resistance there, or at least I might have some resistance. So hats off to you because you did it regardless.
Yeah. And I think there's actually this book that I really recommend. It's called You're a Badass by Jen Sincero. It's not one that I think you like because of the tone of voice, but for me, it really resonated and it really helps me when I'm struggling.
Yeah.
And what she said was, you know, there will always be an excuse not to do something. For example, let's say you have a really big nose and you've decided, I'm not beautiful enough to be a supermodel, but then next year there might be a model with a nose 3 times bigger than yours who is now a top model and is doing incredibly well. And then you had been holding yourself back for so long because you looked a certain way that to you felt not ideal. But then there's someone rocking exactly what you have, maybe even more exaggerated than what you have. And people are accepting it and it's working out for them. And, you know, a lot of people say, I'm too old to do this, but then, you know, let's say I'm 60 and I can't do a marathon. But then there's Diana Nyad who literally swam across from, where was it, Florida to Cuba, and did an ultra doing it that way, and she was 60 years old. There's always going to be people out there that can do it, and those limiting beliefs inside can definitely block you if you don't catch them. And
for sure. And I think if you're even thinking about comparison or what other people are doing, you're kind of in an inner block in itself. Like, you're just, anytime you're thinking, oh, but that person did like this and I don't know, it's just not helpful.
And I think it's even a really great example in that book. She talks about how Ray Charles, you know, was disabled, he couldn't see, and he was a minority, and he was also very poor. He had everything going against him, and he continued making music and became one of the biggest musicians of all time. So whenever you think that you're not good enough, or you feel like you're like in that victim mentality of, oh, I can't do this because I have a disability, or because of this or because of that, so a lot of the times when I feel like I'm not good enough, I just think of Ray Charles, and I'm like, you know what? If he could do it and he could persevere through that resistance, then I can absolutely do it with what I've been given.
Yeah, for sure. You can get inspiration from so many people, like Ray Charles, or anybody who their starting point, you would never think that they'd be able to get to where they got given their starting point, but they did. And yeah, pull inspiration from anybody you can. I think that for me, one of the greatest tools that I've very recently added to try to get rid of some inner blocks is just a mantra, or like a motto of think less. Because I think that cuts through so many of the inner blocks, like so many of the things that you tell yourself that like, oh, like maybe you're just wrapped up in fearful thinking, or you're really anxious about the outcome, or maybe, yeah, whatever it is, like anything that's inner and involving you thinking. I don't know if this is necessarily guaranteed to be effective to other people, because maybe it's too simple, but for me, for some reason, it just has really clicked recently, where I just, in certain moments, I just say think less, and I almost just stop thinking, and it's very like satisfactory. Like I've told you about the think less thing a while ago. Have you ever?
And it's helped me too.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's hard to practice for sure, but when you do I find that my biggest blocks is my own brain. Mm-hmm. So if you just decide to think less, I do think that it's so helpful, because you kind of stop that inner chatter, and it's almost meditative, where you realize that it's all self-induced.
Yeah.
And that's why I think starting this business has been a catalyst for me to realize that starting imperfectly is so important. And the most successful people started imperfectly. They didn't pop out of the womb extremely talented. Some do, but most people just fight the resistance every single day, and eventually they get somewhere. But they start imperfectly, and then they improve as they go on.
Yeah. The way that I like to think about the think less thing is like, think about your thoughts as a tool, but that tool is not useful in every situation.
Or,
there's a lot of situations
your mind
where,
is unreliable sometimes. It will tell you things that are not true.
Yeah. And it's a tool that is great for certain situations, but it'd be like using a hammer to construct the whole house. Like, that hammer is super effective for certain things, but then when you go on and you need to like cut the drywall or whatever, the hammer is a horrible tool. And so I've been finding it useful to think of my thoughts kind of like that, is that, well, I'm not necessarily going to be able to stop the thoughts from going, but I can selectively pay attention to certain ones and try my best to disregard others, and realize that the thought is not as important as it may feel like it is. Just because it's appearing front and center in your mind, you feel like, oh, this must be true, this must be real. But maybe it's just a tool that you're not able to turn off, and it actually is useless in this moment. It's the chainsaw that was helpful an hour ago when you were cutting up a tree, but now it's still running, and it's entirely useful. So that your best bet is actually just to ignore it. And if you can try to, I don't know what it takes to get that skill. For some reason, and like I said, it just felt like it's clicked a lot for me recently.
I think it's because you, as a person, are very nonchalant, whereas I'm very full of chalants.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, you're just a very nonchalant person. Like, you have that stoic mentality where if the fruit is rotten, throw it out, and that's it. And you just don't think about it. Whereas for me, I'm like, no, I really wanted that mango. It's rotten now. This sucks. I wasted $5 and I wasted food, and Whereas for you, you're just like, throw it out. That's it. Gone.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think I also, like, you're a lot more like externally expressive as well. Like I
Right.
think some of those things go through my mind, but it's just like I bottle it in.
Right.
Like when the camera dropped and I realized the lens was broken.
Yeah.
You were saying stuff and I was just not saying anything back because I was just
Right.
like thinking like I don't know what to do. But I think over time I have gotten better at things like that where like, okay, well the lens is broken. I know that, and I know I can't fix it.
I know,
ChatGPT said
but it's
I can't,
amazing.
so.
It's amazing though how you can be in a dilemma where we're about to do a podcast and the camera's broken and I fly out tomorrow, so we really can't record this any other time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, internally you might be suffering, but for me, I'll just be outwardly suffering. I'll be like, no, the camera.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do? Whereas for you, you're just like, okay, let's fix this.
Yeah, it's just not in my nature. I don't know. Like,
so I do think it might be in your nature to think less or to be able to think less because...
Well, I don't know if it's thinking less because I can be bombarded with thoughts. I'm just not necessarily sharing them.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I think like we were talking about earlier, like you said you're sensitive and I think you feel a lot. I think in some way I might be sensitive in terms of like analytically picking up a lot of information.
Right.
And my thing is I need to shut down a lot. I need to shut that down. And because a lot of the things that I'm picking up are like, what about this? What about that? If this happens, then that. A lot of it is useless. And I think I've come to realize that, especially in my mind, getting worried about things like, and I talked about this on the previous podcast too, about the oven being on, but like genuinely things like that where like I'd be just paranoid about like the oven being on and then it's not. I just realized that that's the way my mind operates is I can spend so much energy and so many thoughts and it's completely incorrect and useless.
Yeah.
And over time you just realize like, oh wow, maybe I can actually just ignore a lot. And I mean like a lot of the thoughts that come through is like a lot of them are complete garbage.
Yeah. And I do think that you've been so helpful when I was wanting to start this business and quit my 9-to-5 because my inner monologue was outward. And so I was just telling you, what if I, can't afford my rent, or what if this, or what if that? And you were like, just think less. Just don't think about that right now. You've made this decision. You've decided to do this. So let's go on. If this happens, then we'll deal with it when it happens. And we're 6 months in now and is it 6 months? Almost 6 months.
Almost,
and it's been going great. And all of that worrying truly was for no reason. Of course, we have that innate human ability to worry, which is a good thing. I don't want to be full of no worry. Otherwise, I can be reckless. But I do think that it can really hold us back. So I hope that for people listening that do want to take a little bit of a risk or even just stay where they are, but just create more. Mm-hmm. Don't listen to your mind as much when it's telling you that you're worthless or what you're creating isn't important, because it is. Just you wanting to make it and you wanting to create it is the importance. Mm-hmm. And like we said before, Picasso sold one painting in his lifetime. He only became important later. So art changes importance over time. And that doesn't mean that your art is not important, even if you don't become Picasso who sold millions of paintings later. It just, the act of creating is the important part, and expressing yourself.
Yeah. And art is an act of faith. Like you never know where it's going to go. You get an inspiration, an idea, and you just kind of follow that faithfully, trusting that it's going to lead in a great direction. And when I think back of like when I first wanted to start the podcast, it's the same thing. I was just compelled to create it, and I just followed it and wanted to create it, and I'm glad I did.
And didn't you also do it because it was difficult to public speak? And now look at you. Now you're able to public speak. You're able to communicate extremely well. So it's not only you were compelled to create, but also your skills have just skyrocketed. That's
why that idea of the will to power, I felt truly resonated so much to me when I think back to like the way I was feeling when I first wanted to start the first episode. I just felt like, I feel like there's more to me there. Like I could be more, I could be doing more. And I always listen to a lot of podcasts. So it was like creatively a pathway that I felt like I wanted to take. But yeah, that felt, it resonated massively. Yeah, but the act of faith, like I was saying, I think that you don't know what it's going to be when you start, and you just gotta take the leap, and you'll actually at least respect yourself greatly for having taken that leap.
The amount of self-respect that comes from taking these leaps is worth more than anything else.
And I think a lot of people have, like, and it's a known fact actually, just in psychology, is that people have a negativity bias. Like, they're far more likely to be anxious and worried, and the outcomes don't represent that. And it's a survival instinct that goes way back to when we were like hunter-gatherers, is that it was safer to have a negativity bias and lean towards being negative or anxious and avoiding things, because the world was dangerous, and it's better to think that there might be a lion around the corner and worry and don't take the leap and don't go that direction, than it is the off chance, the 1% chance that there is a lion, and then you to get killed, and that's the end of you.
Exactly.
And so for the sake of our survival, humans have a built-in negativity bias. And I think recognizing that is very helpful, because then when you're scared to take that leap, try to recognize that the reality is it might not be as risky as the way that you're thinking of it, because you're wired evolutionarily to
protect yourself and to stay safe. And I think that is something that really, I think I've grown a lot from this year, even from your advice to me, is I've always been a very intuitive person. So when I've made decisions, it's always felt right in my body when I make decisions. And I knew this innately when I was younger, but I think I lost that when I became an adult and I had to take care of myself and I was more financially independent. I was really, really protecting myself then. And I lost this ability to feel extremely uncomfortable. I didn't realize this, but reading that book and talking to you, when you're about to do something that you really want to do and you're taking a risk, you're about to feel extremely uncomfortable. And that is normal. It's not a bad thing that you're feeling extremely uncomfortable. It means that you're getting out of your comfort zone, but it also means that you're going in uncharted territory. And it's kind of like that quote where sailors get their reputation from storms and tempests. They don't get their reputation from smooth sailing. And I think that if you do want to take some risks in life, you do have to embrace the fact that you're going to feel very uncomfortable. But then on the other side of that, you're going to be creating and living in the path that you want to be in. So even though I may not be in the most ideal scenario that I'd like my life to be on, I feel really content with myself because I'm at least on the path. I feel like I was on the wrong tracks before. I was on a train and I was on the wrong tracks. And now that I'm on the tracks that I'm meant to be going in and in the direction that I want to be going in, it doesn't matter how long it takes, because at least I'm going in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think in some way that might be the purpose of life, is just to follow the path that your conscience wants you to follow. And because it'll send you signals of deep dissatisfaction when you're not following that.
Yeah.
And even when I was researching the concept of the will to power, it was describing that it can be fairly normal to be feeling depressed or anxious or certain things when you're not following the path that you want to be on it. And that again resonated with me, because when I was first starting the podcast, I was feeling kind of depressed and I was super anxious about it. And it just felt like so much energy, but not being allowed to be released in the direction I wanted, and confusion and all this stuff. And now that I look back on that and with the knowledge of what the concept of the will to power is, it's all just about struggling against that and trying your best to listen to that voice that's telling you to go in a certain direction and listening to it, because it's this inner wisdom that we don't really know where it comes from. And a lot of these artists, the way they describe it is that they truly are like an antenna. The ideas and the creations are not really theirs. It's as if they are the tool that the idea is using to express itself.
Yeah.
The idea wants to be expressed in the world, and it says, hey, you, how about you try this? And some people ignore it, some people don't. But that's almost what we are when you think about it. You don't get to choose the thoughts that come into your mind. You don't get to choose the things that you're interested in or the path that you want to create. It's almost like your job is to just follow the thing that your conscience, that inner voice is telling you to do.
Exactly. And you want to follow it, and also, and it's hard because sometimes you don't want to listen to your thoughts. It's like, think less. And then other times it's like, no, you really have to listen. And I do think that you can tell the difference after a while.
For sure.
For example,
between the voices.
Yeah, between the voice. I think the difference is the voices when they're very negative. I think like when it's like, you're stupid, you don't know what you're doing, you're never going to be successful, all that kind of stuff. That is garbage because you don't have evidence of that. Or
the little whisper. It's like the little whisper that's like, you should do that. And, or like, I think you should try that. And those are the ones, especially the ones that I think are pushing you in certain directions. And often directions that provoke that resistance, that fear, that anxiety.
That fear, but also that I feel like it provokes emotion in general.
Yeah.
It provokes excitement. It provokes fear. It provokes being uncomfortable, but also really interested in it. I think you can learn a lot by the people. Like, for instance, a lot of people like to think of envy and jealousy as a bad emotion. I see it as a good emotion because it just shows you what you want. So if you're envious over somebody, think, okay, what am I envious about? Okay, I'm envious of their lifestyle. Okay, then that means that that's what you want. I'm envious that they were able to write this brilliant book. Okay, then you know that you want to write a book one day. Or you're listening to somebody write a brilliant song. You're like, oh, I really love that. It's like that. I feel like that is a really great way to know the things that you want. And so then that way, instead of staying envious, just be like, okay, thank you for that. Now you know, and then you can go towards that. And then it starts to actually be released after a while because then you're going to be going down that path yourself. I remember for a long time feeling really jealous of people that were traveling so much. And so then I decided to save up a ton of money and go traveling. And it was terrifying to go and live in Australia by myself for the first time ever when I was 20 years old. And that same feeling that I had when I decided to move to Australia on my own with a one-way ticket is the same feeling I felt when I decided to start my own business. Terrified. Could not sleep the night before. I could not sleep for nights after I decided to make that decision. But it is, those two are the most rewarding decisions I've ever made. I'm still in the trenches or the difficulty of trying to start a business, but it's nowhere near as difficult as the depression that I felt when I was working for people when I was working in environments that weren't for me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time the thing that if you feel a lot of fear towards a certain thing, it's actually a signal that that's the thing you needed to do the most.
Yeah.
Because like there's something in you that's deeply emotional about it, even though it feels like a bad emotion, something that you should avoid. If you listen to the conscience, there definitely is part of you. It's that inner battle. Like part of you is telling you to do it, and then another part of you is telling you that's terrifying. And I think this is where you get some of the most self-respect and some of the most inner strength is when you push through those roadblocks. Because it's an example of you telling your fears and your kind of maybe lower order versions of yourself, like lower level brain, emotional, like irrational side of you, that it's like, no, I'm in control here. I'm going to follow this and I'm going to cut through that fear and I'm going to try to get to the other side. And I think creating or doing anything that there's a fair bit of resistance provides you with that feeling of inner strength. And I really felt that actually just recently running the marathon, is that like, again, it felt very similar to this will to power idea where as I'm running, it's basically there's there's the me, there's like my consciousness, there's my conscience, and it's up against resistance that's like saying, oh, like you didn't train enough, or oh,
or at all.
Well, yeah, enough.
For those at home, do not try this at home. Do not try
I recommend
not training
actually, no.
and doing a full marathon.
No, because I don't want to.
But not everybody is as fit as you are. I think it's different.
Well, I did
you
train.
You can get very
to be
injured.
Fair, I trained like not enough for the marathon, but enough for maybe a half marathon. But I would still recommend it because the thing is, there's enough people telling. I always like to be the person who tries to encourage someone, even no matter how radical the idea is. Like, because there's already a lot of people that are saying like, oh no, don't do that, that's insane, like you shouldn't do that. But my favorite thing is when someone tells me like, maybe should I try starting this business, or should I try following this? I'm like, 100% try it.
Well, I like doing that too, but then it's another to see my boyfriend going to do a marathon without training adequately and worrying that he's going to get shin splints and get injured and have a permanent injury. That's different, I think.
Yeah, for sure. There's real risks.
And you proved the haters wrong. You were able to do it, and you came out injury free, and you were completely fine. And, you know, I met you along the way with Gatorades. I think you were brilliant, but I do think that there's a difference between encouraging people's dreams and also just making sure that people don't get injured horribly.
Yeah, for sure. Or like if there's risks for like starting a business and they drain their entire bank account, 100%, there's real like actual risks. But I just think that spirit gets shut down so much that if you can contribute to the other side and try to encourage it, I think that is better. So anyone out there, sign up for the marathon, do it. Train
for it though. Sign up, 100%. But train. I think that's my
beat the resistance in training. Because to be honest, that's almost harder than doing the actual event. Like,
and the training part is extremely difficult. And I know this because I did the half.
Yeah.
From your advice and from all of your inspiration, it was wonderful. But the actual half marathon was the celebration. It was all of the training that was the hard work. Yeah. And of course, your marathon was hard work, extremely. I saw you running for 6 hours straight. But I think that train responsibly, everybody.
Yeah, viewer discretion advised. Yeah. But I think those things, like whether it's in a totally different realm, I think that actually translates to your ability to create art. Like, do you find like in you doing the half marathon and you developing the discipline to do the training, it can then translate to you chipping away on a project and also getting less discouraged when you're at kilometer 18 and you're starting to feel like the doubt creep in, you're starting to really feel tired, your knees are hurting, but you know, I'm in control here. And that's the power that I feel like when you're doing the marathon is like, you're just telling it, like, because a lot of people don't understand, they get confused, like why would you want to do that? Why do you sign up for that? Mm-hmm. But that's what it is. That's what I really like about it, is that you feel like the world comes at you in so many regards and beats you down, and it's this powerful force. And doing things like a marathon or creating projects, they're examples of you saying, no, like I'm gonna keep stepping forward regardless of what the world is putting on me. And that's the will to power, exactly it. And I feel like it's just something that feels super great when you can say like, I'm gonna cut out the block. I think it for sure helps cut out the blocks, some of the resistance blocks, because as you're running, there's so many things that are popping in your head. Like we said, I didn't train enough. Like, maybe I should quit. Oh, maybe my knee hurts and it's going to develop into an injury. All these things are real things that you got to think about and worry about, but also not too much, because a lot of them are nonsense.
Yeah.
And
I think for me during the half marathon, it was more so, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. I ran enough, all this kind of stuff. Those are the thoughts. And I do think that doing things like that is a really great way of training that in yourself. I never thought that I was ever able to be capable of running 21 kilometers, especially because I was never a runner and I never enjoyed it. But I really did enjoy the training for that reason. It was really cool to just kind of feel like you're made out of steel and you're made out of iron and you can do anything. And it is really crazy to look back on when it was my first run ever. I did 3 kilometers and I texted you. I said, I died doing 3 kilometers. How am I going to do 21? It is completely insurmountable at that point. And it is really cool to think of starting a business. It's like, you know, I have this one client and it's really difficult. How am I ever supposed to make a living out of this? And then slowly over time, you have another client, and then all of a sudden you have a business. But it's, I think, the same mentality. The 3 kilometers versus the 21, it's all relative. And it's not the kilometers that change, it's you, and it's your perspective on them. And there was some runs that I would go on that were only 5 kilometers that were way harder than 18 kilometers. And it's because of my mindset, how much I had eaten that day, you know, everything, the stress levels during that time, everything changes, what music you're listening to, it all really depends. So it's not the kilometers themselves, but it's really just inside your own mind. And even as you know, like the way that your brain is working during those runs, sometimes you'll feel euphoric and great and you'll feel that runner's high, and other times you're in the trenches and you feel horrible and all of the negative thoughts are coming in, then all of a sudden you feel euphoric again. And so I think it's almost like you stop listening to your brain when it's telling you, no, you've had enough. It's like, no, actually I haven't, because it keeps changing. You know, at kilometer 6, I was feeling horrible, but now I'm feeling great at kilometer 13. So you just know that it does come in waves, and it's similar to creating anything. And it's just persevering through all that.
You pay less attention to like each thought, because you recognize how arbitrary it is when you're doing some of those runs where you feel the wave, where somehow you feel better at kilometer 15 than you did at kilometer 13. And you're like, oh, at kilometer 13, I was saying, oh, I'm done. Like I can't run any further. And then all of a sudden at kilometer 15, you feel all right. Yeah. And like, of course, gradually as the race goes on, you're probably going to feel slightly like worse and worse and worse and worse, just because you're more exhausted. But I think there are unique things to be gained specifically with endurance type events, because it translates to other things, because a lot of projects involve consistency and endurance in order for you to be able to create them. Like your business, at first you can barely dream of, oh, how could I possibly own a successful business? You start it, you get your business license, you build a website, you do all these little things, and then eventually you're like, oh wow, I actually kind of have a business now. Same thing, like when you started the 3K, you say, I'm not a runner, I can't run. You train week after week after week after week. Next thing you know, you're a half marathon runner, which is less than like 1% of people I think do that.
Which is crazy, because I really never saw myself doing that. I remember even signing up for it, and I never thought that I would be able to do it ever. Yeah. And then I did it twice.
Right. Yeah. Back to back. Yeah. It's, don't doubt yourself. Cause I mean, that's why because after seeing things like that, like I try my best to tell myself that as well. And the message for other people as well is, no, you probably could do that thing, because you start to see yourself do it. The more you allow yourself to be a beginner, and then you get good at it and you prove yourself, the more you realize like, oh, there's maybe a lot of other domains that I'm being too tough on myself and saying that there's no way I could do it, because, well, what about the marathon? What about the business? What about this? So like, try to be a beginner and try to start new things. And I think you try to encourage yourself, because a lot of time you're your biggest doubter a lot of the time. I mean,
it's you against you always.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what other people say. If you can do it, if you can't do it, it doesn't matter. Only you know what you are capable of. And even you are your biggest block. At least I find that for myself. I really, truly don't really care if people think that I can do something or not. It's myself that's holding me back 100% of the time.
Yeah, 100%. So I think the general message is cut through the noise, because a lot of it is noise, not things that you need to be paying attention to.
Yeah.
And you'll be far more satisfied for doing that. Your inner creativity will be happy.
Yeah.
Your conscience will be happy.
Follow that. If you want to
So-
create something, it's there for a reason.
Yeah. So what do you plan on creating, just to wrap up this podcast? Where is Nicole creating Studio Hot? What's the vision? Just kind of keep on chipping away?
Keep chipping away at the business for sure. Continuing to get new clients and attracting new clients, kind of like what we were talking about of, you know, you want to attract, you don't want to chase. I'd like to attract the types of clients that I'd like to work with by creating the work that I want to be doing. So that is what I want to be doing, is creating the work that I want to resonate with my ideal type of clientele. That's the business side. I'd really love to get into some more creative outlets, continue to dance, continue to write. I'd really love to write a book one day.
Mm-hmm.
I love fiction, so I would love to write one day. And I think it's difficult sometimes to juggle all the ideas that I have, but the more overwhelmed I get by the ideas, the less I actually execute on any of them. So I'd like to come up with some kind of plan to write and some other creative outlets that hopefully will pan out.
Potentially acting.
Potentially.
Time will tell. We'll see what happens.
Exactly.
But no, that's exciting. I mean, yeah, thanks for doing this with me, babe. And thanks for everybody listening.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.